In a country that boasts about religious freedom, we have 8 states that do not allow atheists to hold public office under state law. It doesn't really matter, though, because atheists can't get elected to office in this country anyway. According to polls, atheists are the least trusted minority in the country, including Muslims. But where does this lack of trust come from? It certainly doesn't come from evidence. Of course, we should be getting used to that by now. Statistics actually show that countries that are the most secular have less problems with violent crime, unwanted pregnancy, and other social problems. Also, there is a significantly smaller percentage of atheists in prison than there are represented in society. Still, we've got this bad rap. Atheists, generally speaking, are people who reserve their belief for claims that have suitable evidence to back them up. How could this make them less qualified to make policy decisions? Willingness to arrive at conclusions without the proper evidence doesn't seem like the type of trait that I want in a decision maker, like a politician. This is the type of thinking that gets us wrapped up in unjustified military actions based on false pretenses. Sound familiar? So, why are atheists so unappealing to the voters? I've heard people say that atheism is an arrogant position, that atheists think of themselves as gods. They have no belief in a higher power, and therefore no humility. This notion could potentially scare voters away. It never fails to amaze me in how many ways the atheist position is misunderstood, though. This is only one of many. As an atheist, I just don't believe in a supernatural higher power. But that doesn't mean that I don't think there's anything better than me or more powerful than I am. There are many people stronger than I am. They're better than me. A cheetah can run circles around me. It's better than me. Tom Selleck can grow a mustache way better than I can. He's better than me. Any one of the billion stars out there has many orders of magnitude more power than I have. It's better than me. My atheism is not an arrogant position. It's a position where I will not allow my ego or my fear of death to run roughshod over my ability to accept what is most likely the truth. It's a position where I am willing to say that I don't know the answers to questions of ultimate concern, because I don't know. Does it make me arrogant to be also willing to say that you don't know either, or that your religious principles are unsupported and therefore should not be endowed with any authority when it comes time to decide public policy? Even though the Constitution states that there shall be no religious tests to hold office, the question of a candidate's religious affiliation is always allowed to be raised. Many voters actually use this as a criteria with which to base their votes. If that doesn't qualify as a religious test, what does? If this isn't it, what do we think the framers of the Constitution meant by no religious tests? What did they foresee? Maybe they were trying to prevent the inevitable consecrated wafer eating contest that would be held to qualify for public office. I've heard many believers say things like, atheists must be immoral because morality comes from God, and without God they cannot know right from wrong. Maybe they think that since an atheist candidate has no sense that he's being constantly watched by some God, there'd be no reason to behave. But this sounds like the logic of a child who was never told why things are right or why things are wrong. Why? Because I said so. It's that same way with God, though. God dictates to us in the Bible what is right and what is wrong. And like the uncaring, disengaged parent, he doesn't bother to explain why. But I think this is what gives atheists a moral edge on dogmatic theists. You know, morality is a funny thing. When you know why something is immoral, you can properly make good moral decisions. If you tell young Timmy to be nice to his friends because then they would be more likely to be nice to him, he is now more qualified to make good decisions in the future. Whereas if you tell Timmy to be nice to his friends because you said so, it doesn't help him at all. Morality isn't absolute, as with dogma. But most of our common moral principles actually are self-determinate when you think about it, and when presented this way, complex moral circumstances in the future become easier to navigate. As an atheist, I've become accustomed to making moral decisions based on reason and compassion. When faced with a moral decision, I like to ask myself, which choice will cause the least suffering? Religious dogma will not allow for this type of discretion. Here's an example. The Bible suggests that premarital sex is wrong, and condoning anything other than abstinence before marriage is immoral. This dogmatic principle was first introduced before contraception, and before we understood the nature of disease. This was also before we understood that abstinence, while is technically 100% effective in preventing pregnancy and disease, is also almost 100% unrealistic as well. But it made sense at the time. It theoretically limits suffering, unless you consider blue balls suffering. Fast forward 2,000 years, and we still have the Catholic Church in Africa teaching people that condom use is a sin. This in a continent with food shortages and an AIDS epidemic. This principle no longer limits suffering, yet it hasn't been discarded. Now, atheists are free to draw new conclusions based on new data. We know now that condoms can prevent unwanted pregnancy. This limits suffering. We know now that disease is the result of viruses, not a curse from some god for having sex before marriage. The fact that rational thought and self-determination take a back seat to Bronze Age superstition in our society has got to be reversed. We can do better than this. Without dogma dragging behind us, we can.